A lot of the internet these days feels pretty bought and paid for, don't you think? Well, at Escape Collective, we are also bought and paid for. The difference being that we are bought and paid for by you, which changes things dramatically. We're a member-funded group of journalists, and we call the shots. No hidden agendas, no sneaky links. Just trust. EscapeCollective.com/join. Support what we do.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Geek Warning podcast from the Escape Collective, your one-stop shop for everything you want to know this week in the world of bicycle tech. Almost everything, anyway. Well, we've got actually a pretty big show on tap this week, although I feel like we say that a lot. But this week, it's largely because SRAM has finally officially announced its latest Red AXS wireless road group set. There's obviously a lot to talk about there. Probably not a big surprise that was coming. Everyone seemed to know. We also
told a few people about it.
They told pretty much everyone about it, seemingly. We also have an updated computer from Hammerhead and some new Goodyear road tires that might have us launching into a kind of bit of uncharted waters in terms of matched wheel and tire fitments. We've also got some things on our minds as usual, a fun Pick One segment, and yet another helpful PSA. I'm James Huang, and once again, joining me today is Escape Collective Senior Tech Editor Dave Rome. Dave, you have been
Hello, James.
very, very, very busy lately.
It's been a few long late nights.
Yeah, how sore are your fingertips after all that typing?
I think there was 8,000 words in this last week.
You have calluses on your fingertips right now?
No, thankfully I have an ergonomic keyboard, but no, I mean it was a big lift. There's a special bonus episode of Geek Warning, which is free to all, related to new SRAM. There were 2 big articles, lots of photos, a lot of testing, a lot of switching parts back and forth to test theory, such as whether, old brake calipers make a difference with the new levers, vice versa. So, I got pretty into it. So,
well, there is a very big written article on the site that you should definitely check out. So head over to escapecollective.com to find that. Dave, before we dive into the news, we have a bit of a corrections, maybe clarification corner, I guess, this week. So first up, what do we need to know about those new Chris King Gen 4 wheels that we talked about last week?
Yeah, so, I mean, we mentioned that, new axles and free hub systems are backward compatible with pretty much, a great majority of Chris King's hubs. And I mentioned that one of my favorite aspects was that you could now, with the new axle assembly and free hub assembly, you could upgrade your R45D center lock gravel road hubs to a new preload system that doesn't require you to remove the preload system in order to take your rotor off. But it turns out that Chris King actually quietly introduced said smaller, better adjusting preload well before this new axle. And so you don't need the new axle or free hub assembly. You just need this one little part number, which is available in silver and black. I'll give you the part number for the silver version, which is PHB735. And the retails for $47 USD, and you can upgrade your R45D center lock rear hub to be less of a pain in the ass to take a rotor off of.
Are you as surprised as I am that design even made it to the hub initially in the first place?
Yep, very much so. But I mean, we put up with it because there's a lot to like in Chris King's hubs, and
there is.
But yeah, anyway, thanks to member John D for pointing this out to us.
All right, so not so much of a corrections, but more of like a little bit of additional info.
Yeah, the more you know.
We do apparently need to clarify our position on hookless, tubeless road wheels and tires after that discussion we had last week of Tadej Pogacar's front flat in the early days of the Giro, however. So some listeners seemingly took away from that conversation you and I had last week that like we were somehow making excuses for hookless or something. To be very clear, you and I both have plenty of skepticism about hookless on the road, which I would say even if everything is working exactly as it should, still doesn't have nearly as much of a safety factor in terms of like a maximum allowable inflation pressure and stuff as we think it should.
Yep.
And there's clearly still way too much confusion out there for what's supposedly a consumer-ready product. So that all said, regarding that specific incident with Tadej Pogacar, we also didn't see anything specifically related to hookless around that crash. So there was no
just a
need
flat
to
tire.
Yeah, there was no need to point fingers. He had a flat tire, not some catastrophic blowout.
Yeah.
Tried turning while basically riding on a carbon rim, and he fell down. Simple as that.
Indeed. I guess on that, my biggest, and I've spent the last week thinking about this, but really my biggest point of contention with hookless at the moment, and what remains to be the failure of the system from a consumer product point of view, is that there's kind of a strict weight limit on it in terms of road use. When you talk about the maximum allowable pressures of 72.5 psi with a 30mm tire, you kind of like, if you're over 90 kilograms, you have to go with a tire that's probably like 35mm wide in order to stay within the maximum pressure guidelines. And all of a sudden, you're no longer on what I would determine to be a true road tire. So I guess there's a lot of issues there, but fundamentally it comes down to that, which is it just feels like a product that has too many limitations to make as much sense in order to be as prolifically pushed as it is.
Not quite fully baked, I believe, is how we have described it. So anyway, yes, that clarification. We are definitely not giving hookless a pass. It just seemed to have nothing to do with that particular incident. All right, Dave, with all of that out of the way, tell me in 10 words or less, what's the lowdown with this new SRAM Red AXS group set?
Not as new as the company claims it is.
Oh man, how many words was that?
9, I think, if I'm counting.
That was talent right there. That was good. I'm impressed. What are we looking at though? Like, so what is it? Like, how different is it then?
So I mean, my favorite thing about this group, and also the big thing to know, is that every single individual piece of this new group set is backward compatible with the Road 12-speed group set, AXS group sets before it. So that includes Red, Force, Rival, even Apex. And because of all that, it sort of means that they're sticking with a lot of common themes. So still 12-speed, still dot fluid in the brakes, still a standard rear derailleur mounting system. No significant changes, to crank Q factor, or the bottom brackets are identical. So there's just a lot of similarities here. Still the same AXS system in terms of what it connects to, the same batteries. Given all that, like, you can kind of start to imagine that it's not like a revolutionary change. It's iterative. So, and a lot of the effort and a lot of the work and a lot of the changes and talking points are pretty much just in the shifters.
So what's different about the shifters? Let's talk about those, because they do look very different.
Yeah, so the big thing is traditionally they had a pull piston in the shifter, which sat at the front of the lever in that sort of top hood section of the lever. And
right, which is why they were so tall.
So tall, yep. And then there was like a little banjo hose that then connected through to that ran down the lever and connected to the brake hose. And that pull piston actually created quite a lot of friction in the system, and perhaps you pulling the lever, which then works a linkage that then pulls the piston, is not super efficient. They've basically mimicked a mountain bike lever design where the lever basically directly now pushes onto the piston, which then pushes the fluid, and so that piston, rather than being at the top of the lever, now actually runs horizontally through the lever. That has completely overhauled what the lever feels like, how much effort is required to pull the lever. It's basically from the hoods. It's like, if your hands are in the hoods, it's close to a fifth of the effort to get the lever moving.
And what's interesting is that essentially they're using what is commonly referred to as a radial master cylinder. So not surprisingly, those SRAM Red road brakes now feel a lot like a Megura mountain bike brake lever in terms of how kind of light and snappy it is.
Yep.
What about the shape of the lever.
So that change of piston then allowed them to completely revise the shape as well, which is now a lot lower, but sort of more elongated and slimmer along its length. So I kind of like, it almost feels almost a bit like a time trial extension in the hand. It's got that much more palm support and is sort of that much more cylindrical when you're holding onto it. And yeah, that's the other big thing. So ergonomics, they've completely rethought their approach to lever ergonomics. And it's different to what SRAM's done in the past. I'd also say it's now slimmer and longer and more supportive than also Shimano in that sense.
Yeah, so you've got a longer upper section on the top to rest your palms. You have more space between the brake lever pivot point and the bar, so you can now wrap 3 fingers underneath the lever body pretty comfortably. Mm-hmm. Before it was just 2.
For sure.
You got that lighter effort.
And so that new shape also comes with a longer reach, which it happens to be on my mind this week. So we'll come back to that later in the episode.
We will come back to that. Any difference in terms of like shift performance? Like so, big thing for sure: ergonomics and brake lever actuation effort. Any difference as far as the shifting itself goes, or the braking performance?
Yeah. So it's probably worth noting at this point that we do have a free episode of Geek Warning that dives into a lot of this, but yeah, basically SRAM has not changed the servo motors in the derailleurs, so there are no physical changes to how fast that derailleur moves, but rather what they have done is worked on the wireless protocol to remove some of the redundancy there. They were claiming that they'd trimmed out about 20% of one of the things that delayed the shift, and my understanding is that is related to kind of the shifter trying to figure out whether you've requested it to shift at the front derailleur based on pushing both buttons, or whether you're just asking it to shift the rear derailleur, and there's kind of a delay as it figures what the command is, and that they'd chop 20% of that delay out. On the road, I can't really say it's obvious to me. It's pretty subtle, and part of that issue is that most of my experiences of late, like I'm riding a gravel bike, I'm testing a gravel bike with force axis at the moment, and that's 1x. So the 1x is actually quicker than the new Red 2x because there's no front derailleur delay.
Is the new groupset lighter?
Yes, 153 grams, 150 grams by my count.
That's a fair bit.
It's now also like 40-ish grams, 50 grams lighter than Dura-Ace Di2. So they claim lightest electronic disc brake group set, which also means it's still heavy compared to a mechanical rim brake group set.
Well, yes, sure. Maybe we can kind of just get down to brass tacks here. Do we like this? Like, you and I have both been using it now.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to like in it. I think it's a legitimate contender if you're buying a new bike and you've got this sort of money and you're looking at the top end of things. I think it's a legitimate contender that you really should be weighing up your options between this and a Dura-Ace equipped bike. Unfortunately, we're just going to ignore the Italians for now. But I think there's a lot to like, and there's also some things that I still like about Dura-Ace. I think Dura-Ace still shifts smoother. It's still faster shifting.
Shifts faster, for sure.
Not that that's a performance metric, but it just feels nicer. I think Dura-Ace still wins in the front shifting, even though SRAM has done some work to its front shifting now and has improved that front derailleur. I think SRAM has the better feeling brakes now.
Yep, I agree with that.
I think SRAM has the better crankset because it's significantly lighter. It has known power trustworthiness. I think that is worth something. Although the power meter is still integrated to the chainrings, which I do not like.
What do we think about the new lever ergonomics on Red?
I like it. I think
I like it too, actually.
Yeah, I really got on with it. I know you didn't love the new bonus button that sits out there, that you thought there's room for improvement there, but I actually find myself using that button more than the paddle.
I think I don't disagree with you that that button position is easier to use than the paddle when you're up on the hoods, particularly when you're kind of stretched out. My issue with that little bonus button that Shimano Di2 levers have had a bonus button for a long time. It's very similar to what you find in GRX Di2 as far as the location. My issue with the bonus button on these new Red AXS levers is that they're pretty hard to find, even if you're not wearing gloves.
Yeah.
And there's like almost no tactility there's almost no tactile feedback at all when you push it.
Yeah, because there's such a thick rubber cover over the top of it.
Such a thick rubber coat, and such a light click. Yeah. So that's kind of the only real miss for me there.
Yeah. So you're not accidentally going to shift it, but at the same time, it's probably not as easy to shift when you do want to use it.
Exactly. So I like the idea behind it, and I just feel like it should be like I think SRAM did a really good job in terms of a lot of the finish work, like the hood. You mentioned this in your article too, like the hoods. The fitment of the hood, like the quality of how well the hoods fit on the body is awesome. Like they are on there. But yeah, that button, it needs to be a little bit clickier.
Yeah. I guess the big thing to consider is just batteries. SRAM does require more attention to its batteries. I feel like I'm always charging AXS batteries. Like I'm looking to my left, I've got batteries just on charge full time these days, and they're just ready. I've just got spares ready to go, and I think that's a good way to go if you've got a SRAM bike. But yeah, that's the big thing is Shimano. The battery is, it's got wires and it connects to a central battery because the two derailleurs are powered by a central battery, and it lasts so long that I think a lot of people forget they need to charge it. Whereas SRAM's always top of mind that your bike needs charging. And I think that's still a massive decision factor between these two options.
Right. It's kind of like my neighbor across the street when she got her Toyota Prius however long ago, it went so long on a tank of gas that she actually ran out of gas because she forgot that it needed gas.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we're sitting on the fence a little bit. So I'm just going to say it. If you were building up a road bike for yourself tomorrow... and budget's not an issue. Are you going Dura-Ace or Red?
I feel like if I were doing a full-blown pure road bike, I would probably still go for Dura-Ace. I like the more immediate shifting. When I shift a gear, I want it like right now. And I feel like especially if I'm like looking to slam a bunch of gears or something like that, Shimano is just much more responsive in that sense. The difference in lever feel for the brakes is not drastic enough that it keeps me from liking Shimano. Yeah. But that's probably the biggest thing for me. And I also feel like with a proper race prepped drivetrain, immersion waxed, everything, I still feel like Shimano runs smoother.
It does.
But if I were building up an all-road bike, I would say for sure, I would probably lean more toward SRAM purely for the gearing options. Yep. Just because I feel like SRAM they have more choices as far as what you can run. And especially where I am, where I can easily be climbing for 2 hours. It's kind of important for me to have low climbing gears when I really, really need it. And even with the latest changes with Shimano, I do just feel like SRAM offers you more versatility there. Yeah.
I fully agree with everything you said there. I would add one small caveat, which is some pure road frames don't have very smart wiring placement, wiring routing for where you kind of have a wire just poking out waiting to be damaged. And in those scenarios, I think I'd actually like the wireless of SRAM. But where a frame actually pokes a wire straight out the very back of the dropout, so it's a very short length of exposed wire, then I'm picking Dura-Ace for pure road, and I think I agree with you. I think the wider gearing options on off-road, and again the lack of wire and the better brakes makes more sense for a mixed surface bike to go SRAM. And then for a gravel bike, if it were in my budget, I actually don't own a bike that has my own SRAM group set on it. I actually have old GRX mechanical on my own gravel bike, but 11 speed. But if I had a SRAM bike that had 1x or 2x gearing and it was a gravel bike, I would very seriously be considering right now to upgrade to the new shifters and brakes. I think it's
that's fair.
it's not cheap. It's it's still a lot of money, but the difference there is truly night and day. Like it is a completely different feel.
And it's not even for ergonomics necessarily, because like I got on just fine with the old SRAM Red lever shape. Like I actually kind of liked that big peak at the top.
Yeah, just the power for the effort.
It just always felt like the levers were it felt like the hoses were filled with like molasses or something. Like there was just so much effort and so much drag.
And like for me, off road, like again, I'm testing a Santa Cruz Stigmata, which I'm overdue to finish, but that's got force access on it. In the hoods, that's a 2-finger braking. When you're off road and you're going down a steep descent, I don't have the finger strength to keep myself in check with one finger. With these new levers, it's genuinely 1-finger braking and quite easy at that. So,
Yep. All right. Well, I guess we're in agreement on that one. So as Dave mentioned, we do have a separate. I don't know. I feel like we agree on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we do.
But as Dave mentioned, there is a special bonus episode of Geek Warning in your feed that focuses exclusively on SRAM Red. David had a discussion with a bunch of engineers at SRAM, just kind of going over a bunch of details. And then for sure, check out the written article on escapecollective.com because there's a bunch of info on there.
Yeah. And that podcast, I'll give a shout out to the podcast because I had fun doing it. I did it while I was at the launch for Red. So they actually had flown in like the head of engineering for the road group, the head of product for the road group, the head of like road strategy. And we had a good chat, including, some design decisions, why they've stuck with the one-piece power meter, whether like their road chains are cross-compatible with the mountain bike chains that look to be similar. It wasn't just the new group. I feel like there was a bit more of a varied chat than that. So certainly if you're sick of seeing everyone talking about Red, then you may still enjoy that podcast.
You can at least listen about it instead.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dave, going along with that new Red AXS group set, SRAM introduced a new Hammerhead Karoo computer, which after the original Karoo and the subsequent Karoo 2 isn't called the Karoo 3.
No, I think GP Llama had told Hammerhead in the meeting that he was in the room with me at the time when we were learning about this, and he's like, I'm going to call this the Karoo 3. You can't stop me from doing it. So So anyway, I'm not sure what Shane ended up doing. I'm sure he is referring it to the Karoo 3, but yeah, it's a new head unit computer. It's Hammerhead got acquired by SRAM in 2022. And this is the first product under the SRAM banner. And basically it's like a high-end GPS computer that's aiming to offer better integration and a better user experience for SRAM bike owners, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like they're obviously happy to sell the computer to everyone, and it is still relevant if you're not a SRAM user, but that really seems to be the main sales pitch. In terms of price point, in terms of feature set, it's like a Garmin 840. It's not quite as big or as feature packed as a like Garmin 1040, for example. But yeah, the big update previously, the Hammerhead required a Wi-Fi connection to get data, which
was so annoying.
Or if you're one of the 6 people to do it, you could actually put a SIM card into the Hammerhead computer. They've now caught up to 2015 and allowed connection through to a companion app. Sorry, that was mean, but it's kind of true. So
it's totally true.
They've introduced a companion app, which means you can use your phone data to upload maps and to get your rides onto Strava and that sort of thing. So that's a really good update. It's an important update. It was a much needed update. Otherwise, I mean, they've just increased battery life, improved button function, more memory, more processing power. Added a ton of new features. It's kind of what you expect of a new computer release.
Yeah, the screen itself isn't new, but there is new Gorilla Glass on it that's apparently like more translucent. So like supposedly the screen is crisper. Mm-hmm. I think if I remember correctly, the screen is like that cover glass is thinner, right? Isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah. And it's a higher end Gorilla Glass. Corning Gorilla Glass.
There's a ambient light sensor, so it should automatically adjust the screen brightness. So it's a lot of like little refinement stuff.
For sure.
But the basic Karoo operating system hasn't changed a ton.
No.
But like as far as that SRAM integration goes, like you can do a bunch of like on bike drivetrain tuning now, just right through the Karoo. That's kind of neat. Yeah, so nothing crazy, but some good updates nevertheless.
Yeah, my favorite thing is like SRAM AXS. If you've got SRAM AXS group set, they have a great app which lets you check battery life, update firmware, all through a phone app. You can adjust your shifting settings. There's a few things you can do in it, and it lets you set your each individual bike as a profile, and it's very easy and quick to do. Like it only takes probably a couple of minutes to set up a new bike in the AXS app. So you have this garage of bikes. And for me, like I give them all silly names, and that lets me track my test bikes, and it shows how many shifts you've done and all sorts of useful things. And it's more useful now that like we've got mountain bikes with like flight attendant, where you basically do all the settings for flight attendant through this app. And so I got sent this new Karoo at the same time I had flight attendant on test, and I'd set it all up in the app, and then I connected the Karoo and I logged in just through my SRAM login, and I was surprised that all my silly names for bikes had automatically appeared in the Karoo device. I didn't do it. It automatically synced. So all the power meters of every bike, it sort of was auto-detecting whatever bike I was on and giving me those profiles and data fields without me doing anything. Nice. And that is a pretty cool user experience, I have to say. Like if you've bought into the SRAM ecosystem and you like your gadgets, that is something that no one else is doing at this point in time.
Fair enough. Interesting. Dave, the third leg of this big product release is new tires from Goodyear. Why are these special?
I don't know.
I posed this question to Goodyear too.
Yeah,
because in the Zipp presentation, they make it very explicit that Goodyear introduced some new tires. They were apparently developed specifically for Zipp rims,
called the Fitment series,
and they're saying it's like optimal aerodynamic profile and like tire security and stuff like that, whatever. I mean, I'm all for tires that fit better and are more secure, particularly pertaining to this hookless discussion that we had a little bit ago. The weird thing for me is Goodyear says they were specifically designed for Zipp wheels, but the reason why it's confusing to me is if Zipp wheels are ETRTO compliant as they're supposed to be, and given how narrow the hookless tubeless rim bed dimensions are defined. What's to keep you from just putting these tires on something else with similar specs?
Nothing. So I guess the key thing here is that these tires are designed specifically around 25 millimeter hookless rims. So the casing has been designed so that the 30 millimeter quoted size measures exactly 30 millimeters when you mount it to Zipp's rims. And then like the tire tread profile and everything else around that is based around using it on a Zipp rim. So they're claiming that because they've done that optimization, they can get some aero gains, some rolling resistance gains because the casing is sort of resized. But yeah, there is some confusing communications around this because Zipp's press release calls out a special bead construction and geometry that creates a superior fit. Goodyear themselves are saying this is more of a performance change, that it's if you've got Zipp wheels, this gives you that little edge over, their tires, which might be based around a 23 mil rim. It's not super clear. And I think the truth within it is that these tires are perhaps not that different to Goodyear's regular tires as Zipp might be leading everyone to believe. But there are differences.
All right. Well, the fact that it is somewhat confusing and might be better or might not, that seems very on brand for hookless, tubeless road. So we'll just leave it at that. That all said, I have generally liked certainly Goodyear's latest round of road tires. So I'm curious to see how these are.
At the very least, I mean, I still have my hesitation over whether I think Goodyear is, say, as grippy as a GP 5000. And independent rolling resistance tests have sort of showed that they're not necessarily at the very top of the game there. But that said, they actually are a very nice tire to use in that when you mount them, they fit really well on a lot of rims and they beat up so wonderfully. Like they really do pop. easily and wonderfully. So,
and even without sealant, they actually hold air pretty okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot to like about these tires. I'm not fully sold. I'm not willing to say that they're the best thing out there, because there are some attributes with them that I still prefer the tires for. But as far as the security on a Zipp rim, I'll have to say it's, if I had Zipp hookless rims, I would seriously consider running these tires, just given how perfectly they did seat.
All right then. Dave, that's a lot of SRAM talk. Let's take a quick break here.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave.
Are you seeing red?
God. If I could reach through my computer right now, Dave. I did say just before the break. Yeah. Right. Do you have these just lined up? Like, do you just think of these at night?
I've got them written down. All right, sorry. So cross that one off.
I mentioned right before the break that was an awful lot of SRAM talk, but we're going to talk about it yet a little bit more.
Oh, no.
But it kind of in a more generic sense, because one of the things that SRAM didn't make a big deal about with the new Red AXS stuff is the effective reach on the new levers, which we kind of were alluding to earlier. And I believe, Dave, you've got something on your mind about that as far as how this whole thing pairs with various handlebars and stuff.
Yeah,
what are we looking at?
It's a broader topic that I think ever since road bikes went hydraulic disc brakes, no one has discussed... Well, sorry, people have discussed it, but no brand has discussed that they basically made your bike's reach effectively longer versus the old shifters you had. So, because a lot of these shifters, in order to fit the master cylinders inside, they've elongated the reach. So where your hands sit on the bike means you're more stretched out in your bike position. And
this dates all the way back to like the Shimano 785s.
Exactly, it does. So this is not a new issue. It's literally the introduction of hydraulic disc brakes to road bikes has happened. No one discussed it. There have been some iterations of like lower end Shimano levers, like the Sora levers for a while got non-series Sora level levers. I'm struggling to remember the name of them, but they looked kind of like the new SRAM, but even more comically long. They were enormously long and really did have an impact on a bike's reach, but no brand discussed it. No one speccing bikes accounted for it. Like we didn't see stems get shorter to make up the difference. It's just kind of completely overlooked, and no brand claims to, no brand is giving you these reach numbers for the hoods either. So that is something
and there's no standard established for what that number would even be.
Established. So that is something that, SRAM kind of just completely glossed over with the new Red, but they are longer. It's hard to measure this thing, and because the new levers are meant to be run at a taller angle than before, it's hard to do an apples to apples comparison, but it looks like there's about a 5mm gain to your reach by using these new levers. And also the same applies for Shimano. Shimano levers are that little bit longer as well. So yeah, I just think it's an interesting topic, and combine that with what I'm seeing from a lot of bike specking handlebars that are now seemingly, for a while we had a lot of compact handlebars. I'm starting to see reaches grow out again. And it just makes no sense to me, given that we got longer brake levers, longer hoods, being combined with longer handlebar reach, but the frame reach itself hasn't grown. The seat tube angles, yes, people are running seats slightly more forward than they used to, but that's not really being adapted for. And yeah, I think people are just getting more stretched out without knowing it.
I mean, going with a longer reach, well, if you are running a more forward saddle position, using a longer reach lever and a longer reach bar, like we're seeing 80mm reach bars all over the place now.
Yeah.
But going with those two things is an easy way to adapt your position without having to change your frame.
Absolutely.
But that also shifts your weight bias pretty heavily onto the front, heavier onto the front wheel, which depending on the type of riding you're doing may or may not be a good thing.
No. So yeah, I think it's just, it's an interesting trend. It's not something that, like, I'm saying don't buy the new SRAM because of it, but I'm saying be aware of it, because basically if you're buying a new bike, this is a thing. So if you're coming from a rim brake bike or, a bike with a 70mm reach handlebar on it, chances are you might be surprised that even though you've bought a frame with the same reach, you're using the same stem length, the head tube angle is roughly the same, that the new bike feels longer. High chance it's in the handlebar and levers.
Right. It's kind of like how if anyone out there has upgraded from GRX mechanical to GRX Di2, a lot of those people probably found themselves having to shorten their standards by 10 mils or so.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So on top of this, then we've also got the trend of bar width. Bars, people are going to narrower bars. I know I have. When I was racing, I was put on by when I was racing as a junior, should I say, I was put on ridiculously narrow bars. I was put on, I think they were 38s at the time, 36s, and everyone sort of laughed at me. And then over the years, I sort of trended to 42s, and now I've trended back. All my bikes are 40s. If I'm picking a road bike tomorrow, I'm going to ask for a 38 because a lot of those bars now flare, so it's 38 at the hoods. So yeah, bars are narrowing bars are trending narrower. I got carried away there, but and so the idea there, this is a lesson still being learned in mountain bikes, but I think is more commonly known. But the narrower your bar goes, the shorter your effective reach is. So I feel like we're kind of balancing out. Bar reach is getting longer, shifter reach is getting longer, but people are going narrow on handlebar, and they're kind of evening out to the same starting point. But it's just worth knowing the relationship between all of these and keeping that in mind.
Well, I wonder if internally at SRAM someone just mocked up a concept of levers that just bolted directly into the stem.
Yeah,
somehow, like just not even bother with the handlebar, just stick them right on there.
Yeah, what you're describing is a time trial bike. But yeah,
anyway.
I think it's just, it was on my mind. I think it's a really good topic to discuss and put into people's mind that, if they're talking about drop bar fit, your handlebar shape, your handlebar reach, your handlebar width matters hugely. And then even the levers that you're putting on them can have a pretty significant change to your overall reach. So yeah, if you're looking at frame geometry and tossing up between one or two because, one's got a reach by 2 millimeters longer than the other, that's not where the problem is.
Yeah, and it's certainly something to think about if, based on everything that we've been talking about so far, if someone out there is considering switching from current generation SRAM Red, previous generation SRAM Red to this new stuff, and especially if you have a one-piece integrated cockpit, be prepared to potentially make some fit adjustments based on the new dimensions of those levers.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Dave, we really, really are not going to, we really are going to stop talking about SRAM related stuff in general now. Although again, like that on your mind thing was a little bit more generic. But anyway, let's move to pick one, because I feel like we've got a pretty good run of pick ones here and we've been having some fun with it. I don't think we've done this one yet, this category. Let's do tubeless plug kits. What are you going with here for tubeless plug? And I wonder if the choice would be different for road versus mountain. What do you like for a tubeless plug kit on the road?
I think anyone that's listened to me for long enough or has read my things will know I'm a bit of a fan of Dynaplug. So Dynaplug was one of the original offerings in the market. They've got a patent on this design, which is basically a brass tip that is formed / a part of the rubber plug that follows it. So you basically insert the brass tip through the tire and it leaves the plug in place, rather than using the more traditional sort of rubber plug and then an insertion fork to get it through. And yeah, the idea there is that the brass tip is actually narrower than the traditional insertion fork, so it doesn't open up the hole as much. And then the brass tip stops the plug from coming back out because it's wider than the plug, and it's also preloaded, so it's always ready to just jab in, kind of like an EpiPen. And they're strong. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm a proponent of Dynaplug. The negative to them is price. They're significantly more expensive than the generic bacon strip style repair systems. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like you can recover them after you've retired the tire to use the plugs again.
No, and you need to remove them if you end up having to put a tube inside. Like say the plug doesn't work because you forgot to top up your sealant. You do need to remove them before you put a tube in. So they're not perfect, but for me they're the best option. They're the best solution as far as tubeless plugs go. And I've been raving about them for
a really long time now.
A really long time. I feel like they've kind of caught on in recent time. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of the reason why they ended up doing a shorter insertion tube version for road, because I pointed out to them they hadn't had customers that had used them on road bikes until I tested them. And yeah, I pointed out that, road tire being so much lower in volume, you can actually, if you got a flat directly at the top of the tire, you could actually kind of poke a hole through your rim tape by not being careful enough with their mountain bike system. So they then made like a shorter length plug so you don't bottom out against the rim when you insert it. So yeah, anyway, that's I think I said the word insert too many times there, but yeah, that's kind of, yeah, I've been using them a long time. They've really proven themselves. They, you do need sealant in your tire to guarantee that they work, but yeah, I'm a fan.
I think I'm going to be in agreement with you on the road for Dynaplug.
Yeah.
And I guess of all the kits that they make, I think my favorite one is the I can't remember what it's called. The aluminum one, the one that has
they're all aluminum.
Well,
they're almost.
Sorry,
plastic ones.
sorry, not the aluminum one. The carbon racer one that has just like the two ends on it. Just mainly because it's really easy to stuff into a saddle pack, or there are a variety of little mounts that you can put right next to your bottle cage. So
it's super light,
particularly
super cheap.
Yeah, and particularly relatively speaking.
Yeah,
but particularly on the road, it is super important to be able to deploy a plug really, really quickly, just because you have so much less air volume to play with. So I do like how that pointed tip, more often than not, if you have a cut or something on your road tire, it's usually not that big.
Yeah.
So I do like how those plugs are a little bit smaller than a lot of those bacon strip insertion forks that you were talking about.
Yeah.
What about for off-road, though? Do you still like Dynaplug for mountain bike?
Yeah, I do. So I use my favorite Dynaplug. They've got quite a range, and the common theme is the barb rubber strips. But my favorite is called the Racer Pro, and it's very small. It kind of looks a bit like a tiny little EpiPen. It's dual sided, and then within that you've got preloaded strips, and each preloaded section is actually dual sided, so they thread into the tool and you can flip them. So there's 4 preloaded plugs ready to go within that one tool, and that's the one I like to carry with me on mountain bike rides. And that, because there's 4 of them, you get you can mix and match what size plugs you use. So they do have bigger plugs for bigger holes, and those smaller pointier plugs for the little cuts that your sealant's kind of struggling to seal but kind of is. So yeah, that's my go-to for the mountain bike.
I feel like for mountain bike stuff, I'm not quite as committed to Dynaplug, just because I almost always ride with my 1-up EDC pump, and I have the tubeless plug kit in there that actually is always preloaded and can also deploy pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I feel like I am generally not in a situation where I'm not quite as frantic to seal the hole oftentimes, especially since on that bike I have an actual pump and not a CO2.
Yeah.
And I like being able to have a lot of plugs sometimes, because particularly when you're out in the middle of nowhere, I'll often carry like a whole like little pack of bacon strips in both sizes, just in case, just because we've all had that. We've all had those rides where things go particularly badly. Like you can go years and years and years without a flat, and then one day you get like a dozen of them or something.
Yeah. I would also say mountain bike. So on road, you've got the high pressure trying to push the plug out, and Dynaplug seems to be more resistant to kind of being pushed out. Off road, you have much, much lower pressures, and bacon strips tend to work quite well in that scenario. And at the same time, because you got lower pressures, you've also say the plug doesn't quite perfectly seal the hole. There's still a high chance that the sealant will hold and fill the gap around that plug. Whereas on road, it seems to matter a whole lot more whether that plug works or not.
Yeah, and the plugs are a lot cheaper because I feel like you're more likely to need them off road, and so it does. I mean, even Dynaplugs themselves, we're not talking a huge amount of money here, but I mean, it adds up after a while.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is, so I think he's a current member. So Tom Anhalt, he was I know he was a subscriber at the old place, and he's a reader and part of the audience that I know we've all kind of been in regular contact with a little bit. He's advocated for quite a while his technique of using just like a little bit of like cotton cooking twine that he uses in a traditional tubeless.
Which is kind of what a bacon strip is, in a sense. It's kind of like a
just a bacon strip is sort of
a,
just the bacon strip is kind of soaked or like kind of like infused with rubber already.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So like the method that Tom talks about, obviously dirt cheap because you can get a roll of that twine for next to nothing. Have you tried this?
No, I haven't. I've certainly tried bacon strip insertion forks and all that, but no, I haven't tried a non-rubberized strip or filler.
I mean, it makes sense. I haven't, and I honestly keep forgetting. And I think it's only because I haven't found myself in a situation where I've run out of bacon strips where I haven't needed to try this.
Yeah, I'm surrounded by them.
So I am curious. I should just make a point of trying it, just jab a hole in a tire, just try it out at some point. Because I am curious if it works. Because in theory, as long as you said, as long as you've got a decent supply of reasonably fresh sealant in your tire, I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Yeah, it should certainly work. And yeah, I mean, it's basically the exact same theory as a traditional bacon strip, which comes from the automotive world as a tire plug idea. So it's, I think there's merit to what he does, but I also think bacon strips are cheap enough that, if that stickiness and rubber coating of the bacon strip makes it that little bit more effective, then why not just spend the 20 cents or whatever it is each time you get a flat?
Yeah, fair. Have you had any experience with something other than Dynaplug or bacon strips, which basically would just be either like the WTB / Clever Standard setup or the Stan's Dart? Have you played with either of those?
Stan's Dart, yes. I haven't played with it since the original version, which had a plastic tool that used to always break. So the plugs were actually quite good, but the tool would leave you with an inner tube in your tire. The Clever Standard stuff looks quite smart. It's honestly, it basically merges what Dynaplug does, but with a bacon strip. So you've got like the insertion bullets that are reusable. Clever idea. It sort of skates around the Dynaplug patent in a way, but in a pretty clever, unique approach. Yeah, I think it's smart. I suspect it works. I haven't used it yet. I believe I am getting my hands on some soon.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it set, and again, I should just start punching holes in some tires because if I wait for a flat, it may or may not be a while. Anyway, with that said, I'm surely going to get a ton of flats this weekend. All right, Dave. Well, I would say this is maybe not our most exciting pick one segment because this is one of those ones where we kind of mostly agree on stuff here.
Felt a bit deflated. Yeah. Flat.
God. Dave, let's move on to our PSA, okay? Because for God's sake, I hope you don't have punch for this one.
I'm so sorry, everyone.
Dave, this week's PSA is related to headsets again. You had something that you wanted to talk about, so what is it?
It's definitely a PSA we've done before, but I think it's that time that we remind you that chances are if you have a modern bike, there's a high chance that your headset might be loose. Because, things don't stay together as reliably as they used to, it seems. So, just check for a loose headset. I'll get to that in a second. But basically, riding a bike with a loose headset is going to cause unwanted wear in places you don't want it. Namely, it's going to cause the compression ring that keeps the headset compressed and the bearings, bearings running tight, that can wear into and dig into your steerer tube, which is bad news. And it's mostly a problem on anything with a carbon steerer tube, where the carbon is significantly prone to abrasion from often metal compression rings, but it can also be a safety factor on metal steerer tubes with enough if you ignore it for long enough. So check that your headset isn't loose. And James, what's your advice for doing that?
Well, I know this is something that we've talked about a couple of times. I often like to lock the front brake and turn the front wheel 90 degrees and then just sort of like rock the bike fore and aft to see if there's any play in there. Because otherwise, if you just do it with the wheel straight forward like you normally would be riding, then you might be feeling a little bit of play in your, assuming you're running disc brakes, you might be feeling a little bit of play in the pads inside the caliper instead. So turning the wheel 90 degrees will help avoid that. Zach Edwards from Boulder Gruppetto, he had a really, really nice solution for that as well. He was basically saying, like, if you can independently turn your headset cover, then that is often a good, that's often a good sign that your headset is loose.
Headset cover, or if you've got cylindrical spacers. That's the other. And cylindrical is the key there, because I would say that the reason why I still rely on the turning the bars 90 degrees and rocking the bike back and forth is because now we have so many bikes, particularly road bikes anyway, that have shaped steer tubes and shaped spacers and headset covers and that sort of thing. So even if your headset is super loose, a lot of times those things won't move anyway. So I still like to use the rocking technique. Yeah, and I'd probably just add one little caveat to that, which is there are some bikes out there where the headset top cover runs so close to the frame that it kind of supports the headset in the event you do try rocking it, and it can still feel like it can kind of hide a loose headset. So, sometimes it might pay to check, put your hand at the top of the headset, and also down at the crown where the bottom of the headset sits, where the fork comes into the frame, and see if there's any movement in either. That's kind of, do that. Do the Zach Edwards method of, seeing if you can rotate anything if it's round, and also what James says, and you'll probably be able to figure it out. On top of that, also, just any random knocking, if you were to drop the front end of the bike onto the ground, often it's your lights or your pump on the frame that makes noise, but that can also signal something's loose there.
Yeah, I guess the reason why this came up as this week's PSA is in our last Ask a Wrench episode, we had a specific question from an Escape Collective member talking about how his Specialized Crux always kind of had a clunk on kind of bigger impacts. It didn't really seem like the headset was loose on just kind of like smaller buzzy type stuff. And then since then, our Discord channel for Geek Warning, I think it was in there, like someone had mentioned that I think they work at a shop, and they have a Specialized dealer that has seen that's had quite a few Cruxes come through. And they were saying that one issue that they've noticed with that is that the section of the upper headset cover that is compressed between the stem and or headset spacers and the conical split ring on the headset, like apparently those things have had a tendency to crack. And then at that point, you're never going to be able to get a proper headset adjustment, and it's just not going to be right. So anyway, point being, if things just still don't feel right up front, it is worth really, really figuring out where that play or clunk is coming from before you end up with a damaged steer tube, because that is a problem.
Yeah, your headset, there shouldn't be any creaking in the front of your bike. There shouldn't be any knocking in the front of your bike. And if there is, I would say don't be too proud to try figure it out yourself. Just go find yourself a good mechanic, because it could be something that is easily overlooked or needs a more experienced eye over. So, it is a safety critical component. It's incredibly expensive to fix if you ignore it. So, definitely, this is one area of the bike that I would say, a lot of home mechanics could probably benefit from having a professional check it.
Yeah, and well, certainly at least in the U.S., hospital visits are expensive. So, yeah, it's good to avoid those. All right, let's cap off this episode with a couple little bits of small news here, and then before we wrap up, I know this is a company that we've mentioned a bunch of times. They're based in the UK, Ratio Technology. They have a new pulley cage assembly called the SR52T. This one's meant for SRAM Transmission rear. Yeah, very catchy. This one's meant for SRAM Transmission rear derailleurs. It once again, like their other full pulley cage assemblies, it features machined aluminum side plates. You have the option of getting machined acetal, which is basically Delrin. 14-16 tooth pulley wheels, so slightly oversized, same as what SRAM uses on transmission. Anyway, what's cool about these is that Ratio has integrated or incorporated the same offset angle between the top and lower pulley that SRAM uses on stock transmission cages, which is pretty cool. So there theoretically shouldn't be much, if any, difference in shift performance. But the appealing aspect of these, at least according to what Ratio was talking about, is the way they have shaped the cage plates. It sort of shields. Shouldn't say shields, but it kind of wraps around the front edge of the lower pulley a little bit more. So apparently it is a little bit rocky in the region where Ratio is based, and they're saying that shape is a little bit more likely to let the cage kind of shrug off a rock impact as opposed to the stock cage, which is a little bit more squared off.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to put you on the spot here, and do you know how they're handling the clutch mechanism, which is built into the cage assembly for SRAM? Because I believe a lot of the pre-existing cage assemblies for transmission require you to basically reuse the clutch assembly, which is not meant to be removed off the original cage. So I'm wondering if that is the exact same story here.
I don't recall anything. I don't recall them talking about anything specific to the clutch. That said, I did install a Ceramic Speed OSPW assembly onto a GX transmission rear derailleur, and I don't recall having to do much of anything with the clutch. By my recollection, that assembly process was sort of shockingly quick and easy, like literally 5 minutes. And my suspicion is that the Ratio cage would be a similar thing. I don't remember having to pull the cage out, or I don't remember having to mess around with the clutch assembly at all.
Okay. Not unbolt anything from the original cage to move it over?
Nope.
Is your new derailleur really floppy?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Maybe I'm off base on that one. Yeah, I'm sure we'll be doing a corrections corner next week then.
God, we've had to do a string of those lately. Finally, Pirelli is continuing to move more tire production into their new Italian facility instead of overseas in probably Thailand, where a lot of other places were having their tires made. The latest model is the new P0 Race TLR RS. It's Pirelli's new flagship road tire, which Pirelli claims to, quote, meet or exceed current race category benchmarks for speed, weight, and grip, unquote. Not surprising. It's got a new Smart Evo 2 rubber compound. Don't know how it's actually different. It does have a thinner tread cap, which both of those things reduce rolling resistance. It's got a lighter and thinner nylon casing, a new Kevlar bead construction that supposedly improves compatibility and security across a broader range of tubeless and hookless road wheels and rims. Can't complain about that. It's only offered in 26, 28, 30, and 32 mil widths, all 700C, of course. With retail price of 100 US, 145 Australian, or 90 euros. Road tires are like $100 each. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's consistent across a lot of brands at the moment. Yeah. Bicycles are expensive.
Go figure. I didn't mention a price for that Ratio kit. Actually, it's fairly inexpensive. The cage only is about less than $80 US, or like $120 Australian. And then if you include the jockey wheels, it's actually not even that much more expensive. It's still under $100 US and 150 Australian. So anyway.
Yeah, cheaper than SRAM's own replacements.
Yeah. So well done Ratio. And I do have a set of these Pirellis on hand in 28s. I haven't had a chance to ride them yet. But they do feel quite supple. I will give them that. All right, Dave, that will do it for this week's episode of Geek Warning. What final words do you have for our listeners here?
Yeah, thank you to those that support us through subscriptions and memberships and make everything that we do possible. But if you don't support us yet and you like what we do and you want to see Escape survive, then please join. We've got monthly and annual options of different price tiers. Anything that you do makes a huge difference for a small company like Escape. And to do so, please head to escapecollective.com/member.
Dave, how much money do we get from ads right now? How big's that pile?
How big's the pile? Let me count it. Oh, it's 0. Yeah, I mean, we are entirely member funded at this time, and it's every membership counts at this time. So we're not profitable, and need more members in order to get there. So yeah, if you do like what Escape Collective is doing and you want it to survive, then support it.
Particularly since last I checked, we are not actually a 501c3 charity or a nonprofit organization here. So, so that, well, I guess there's our other little call to action there. Yeah, if you're not a member, please consider becoming one. And yeah, this all happens because of your membership dollar. So thanks to all of you who are already members. That'll do it again for this week's episode of Geek Warning. We'll see you all next week.
Cheers.